welcome officially to everyone on this call and to the Writers Circle's very special presentation featuring Jane Friedman, who will be talking to us all about how artificial intelligence is affecting the world of writing. As you probably know, Jane Friedman is a publishing guru and more than 25 years of experience in media and publishing. Her expertise is in business strategy for authors and publishers, and Lord knows I have turned to your blog and your website countless times and recommend it to my students all the time. She is the co-founder and editor of The Hot Sheet, a newsletter about the book publishing industry, and has previously worked at Writer's Digest and the Virginia Quarterly Review. In 2023, Jane was awarded the Publishing Commentator of the Year by Digital Book World, and her newsletter was awarded Media Outlet of the Year in 2020. And in summer of 23, she had the disconcerting experience with AI fraud of her own books and her own authorship. So that is what inspired this particular conversation. Without further ado, welcome, Jane Friedman.
Thank you so much, Judy. So I do have slides as usual. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. You should all see them now. And I'm going to keep the chat popped open in case I see any questions I want to address in the moment, but I do expect that we'll do some Q&A at the end as well. So before anyone asks, I just want to offer reassurance that you can get the slides at the following link if you would like to have them. I'm also putting a link to the slides in the chat, so you can click on that link, save that link, take a picture of the link. The slides will be indefinitely available. Now, before I continue, I just want to remind people, if you would mute yourself, that would be greatly appreciated so that I don't hear your background conversations and noise as I present, and no one else will have to hear it either. So thank you for that. All right, so here's how I'm going to tackle this very tricky topic. I want to be clear that this is a fast changing environment. So for instance, if you're watching this as a recording 6 months from now, a lot of things may have changed, and I cannot control that, obviously. There are news articles coming out every day that with new developments, new companies, new products, and also the legal situation is very fast moving. So my goal here today is to give you a sense of what things are like at the moment. I'm going to try to do that without any judgment. I'm not here to tell you whether to use AI or not, but I am here to tell you about how it's already being used, and you can make your own personal decisions about how to proceed. Okay, so first, for those who might have a fuzzy understanding of AI, I want to talk about a definition of generative AI. That's what we're really talking about here today. I'm going to talk about the copyright issues, which then gets into fair use, and then the lawsuits that are currently underway against generative AI. We'll talk about how to protect yourself and your work. We will touch on what I experienced. And, to the extent that you can protect yourself, I'll give you some tips. We'll then talk about how AI is being abused, which it is, but also how it's being used well. So it's really, I consider the tool pretty neutral. It's about what you choose to do with it. There are very specific tools for writers that you should know about. And then we'll see how time goes, but I would like to do a little bit of a demo with ChatGPT just to show you some of the things that I've been using it for that you might find interesting. All right. So here's the definition of generative AI. And from here on out, I'm just going to call it AI. But I want to be clear, there is something called artificial general intelligence. That's not what today is about. We don't know that if we have, in fact, achieved artificial general intelligence. That's a debate for another class. For generative AI, this is artificial intelligence capable of generating text, images, or other data. It could be songs or audio. It could be video or movies, using generative models, often in response to prompts. These are text prompts. So it uses deep learning models to generate content based on the data it was trained on. So that's the definition. Now, there are already many corporations, most of them global corporations, that are using this technology, and it's becoming part of a feature, and you yourself may have already been using them. The biggest leader in the generative AI space is Microsoft. They own about half of OpenAI. OpenAI is the company that has brought us ChatGPT, Sora, if you saw Sora, and many other tools. Of course, Microsoft is not the only player. There's also Google that is heavily investing. Their tool is called Gemini. Apple is investing, Facebook is investing, Amazon is investing, all sorts of companies are investing. And I've just mentioned, the tip of the iceberg here. It's very hard not to see a business somehow looking at how to use this. And in fact, I was at a conference in November. It was the International Association of Privacy Professionals, which is a gathering of people from government, industry, public organizations that are trying to figure out how to keep up with the innovation happening, because the laws really haven't caught up yet, especially privacy laws haven't caught up yet with where the technology is. You have probably been using AI, even if you don't realize it. I was just contacted the other day by someone who said, who was surprised in their use of Grammarly that they now, kind of trumpet, hey, we're an AI technology. And she's like, I'm really concerned about this. I like using Grammarly, but I don't want to use AI. So, we're in this kind of like weird space where people are very anxious and hesitant to use AI tools, but they've probably been using them without really putting the label of AI on it. And Grammarly is one of them. It absolutely uses AI. I have some other icons here on the screen of tools you might be familiar with that you might already be using that have AI components, like Otter, which transcribes meetings, or Notion, which is a note-taking tool, and so on. So let's talk about some of the copyright questions here, because I know this is one of the key points of fear and anxiety about losing your rights or having your work stolen in some manner. There are 3 separate questions here. It's very important to keep them distinct from each other. Obviously, there's overlap, but these questions can be, the law will look at them differently. So the first question is, the AI models that we have today, like ChatGPT, is it copyright infringement? And so when you see the lawsuits from the New York Times or the Authors Guild or Getty, it's about the AI model training for the most part, and the accusation that this is direct copyright infringement that then is leading to other types of infringement in the output. So that brings us to the second question. Are the outputs infringing? And sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not, which makes this a very confusing area. And then the third question is, can the outputs themselves receive copyright protection? So I want to talk about each of these separately, starting with the training. So do training the models constitute copyright infringement? Now, I want to be clear. The ship has sailed. We're not going to be turning back the clock. We're not going to put the genie back in the bottle. Whether it's ChatGPT or Sora or Google's Gemini, doesn't matter. These models have all been trained on all sorts of content. Arguably, some portion of it is under copyright protection and was used without permission. That's why there are so many lawsuits, because this happened without people's consent. And especially the New York Times or the Authors Guild feel like there needs to be a licensing agreement in place. But again, I just want to be clear. It's not like these models even if these lawsuits are won, I do not see the models just dropping all of the model trading that they've done. I don't even know if it would be possible at this point, and starting over. That's not our future. It's about getting money for the training that has already occurred. So, of course, there are people who disagree about whether these models' training is copyright infringement. infringement. And that's why we have the lawsuits. There are going to be lots of yes, it is, and no, it isn't. And you can find many, many articles discussing the pros and cons of whether or not it's infringement. Jean comments in the chat, someone described it as the pirates are already in the ocean. I guess that's not a bad metaphor. But the people the people who have built these tools, or the companies that have built these tools, don't see themselves as pirates. They don't see themselves as lawbreakers. Generally, they see themselves as doing this for the good of humanity in some sense. Yes, we can be cynical about that because they're making billions of dollars while doing it. But they do have a strong feeling like what they're doing is not wrong. And this is part of the reason why they feel that way. And I think it's helpful to look at it from their perspective as tech people who are training the models. They see, whether it's written work, images, video, whatever the data happens to be, and data takes a lot of different forms, they see the data as sand. And by that, we mean each grain of sand doesn't have a particular value associated with it. It only has value when you put it all together in aggregate and you get the beautiful beach. So data is not oil. Oil is very valuable on a granule by granule basis. Data is like sand. So you'll see this metaphor used a lot. There's a very good article, and actually I want to let everyone know I have a reading list that I'm going to share with you if you want to explore these ideas further, with links to all, for where all this material is coming from for your further education if you wish. But one of the most talked about articles about this, whether it's infringement or not, comes from a tech consultant named Benedict Evans. And he doesn't come down on one side or the other. He is offering perspectives. Here's how to think about it. And he says OpenAI, which runs the most popular model, ChatGPT, he says OpenAI hasn't pirated your book or story in the sense that we normally use that word. It isn't handing it out for free. It's not like someone can really read your book through OpenAI. Indeed, it doesn't need that one novel in particular at all. In Tim O'Reilly's great phrase, data isn't oil, data is sand. It's only valuable in the aggregate of billions, and your novel or song or article is just one grain of dust in the Great Pyramid. Makes you feel good, doesn't it, to be the grain of dust? But in technical terms, I think we can appreciate what's being said here. The model has to train on millions of things to make any sense and to be a model in the first place. It doesn't care what you feed it. So OpenAI could retrain ChatGPT without any newspapers if it had to, or without any novels, and it might not matter. It might be less able to answer detailed questions about the best new coffee shops, but that was never the aim. This isn't supposed to be an oracle or a database. It's supposed to be inferring intelligence from seeing as much as possible of how people talk as a proxy for how they think. So again, this is just perspectives. I'm not trying to argue anything, but I do think it's important to understand why the companies feel like this is fair use. So if ChatGPT and other models and OpenAI, et cetera, if these companies win their fair use case, it's going to be because a judge looked at these 4 criteria and decided that it's fair use. Fair use in the United States is a very unique concept. It actually doesn't exist outside of the United States. It's very peculiar to our legal system. If you're in Canada, it's different. I don't know how they're going to look at this. But in the United States, we have it's 4 criteria that determine whether something's for use. They're supposed to be looked at equally. The purpose of and character of the use, is it commercial or not? And so, of course, with AI companies, it is a commercial use, and that's going to play a role in how judges look at this. The amount and substantiality of the work used, I don't think this factor is likely to play a role at this point. The nature of the copyrighted work, is it creative or factual? So facts aren't really protected under copyright law. It would have to be a very unique arrangement of facts. This is why you can't copyright a recipe, but you can copyright the description and the creative aspects that surround the list of ingredients and the steps. You can't copyright the phone book. You can't copyright the list of 50 United States in alphabetical order because they're facts. And then finally, the fourth criteria, the effect of the use in the market. Is it depriving the creator of income? And this is another factor that really, is going to be argued about a lot, and one of the reasons why is the New York Times lawsuit in particular was able to show that if you creatively prompt in the right direction consistently, you can reproduce some of the material that's been ingested by the models. So this is in the lawsuit that the New York Times produced. The output that they were able to get from ChatGPT, all of the text that you see in red that came out of the model is an exact duplicate of what was published in the New York Times. So they're making a very compelling argument that it is regurgitating word for word material that has been ingested. Now, the people who've built these models say this is not supposed to happen. And in fact, the New York Times had to be very manipulative to make this happen. And so there's a lot of discussion about, well, if there are proper guardrails in place, if there are certain restrictions in place, and this didn't happen, would the model then be fair use? It's very hard to say, and I'm not a lawyer. The other problem you run into is called the Italian plumber problem. And this gets into image generation out of these models. So if you go to Midjourney or your favorite image generation, AI image generation, and you say, show me a picture of an Italian plumber, you're going to get something that looks like Mario. And that is a copyrighted character. And that's why it's called the Italian plumber problem. Something similar happens if you go and ask for, a cartoon mouse. You're probably going to get Mickey Mouse, which is protected under copyright law. So there's a lot of discussion about whether this is a bug or a feature and how it can be prevented or not, and how that affects the lawsuits. Here's another example that Getty Images put in their lawsuit, showing on the left the actual copyrighted protected image that's in their storehouse that you have to pay to license. And on the right-hand side is an image that was generated from a prompt. It was probably some sort of prompt about show me a soccer something. And you can see the mangled Getty Image logo sitting on top. So again, showing that the regurgitation issue of copyrighted material has been and might continue to be a serious problem unless the models are refined further. So what is really fascinating is that these lawsuits, and there's probably more than a dozen at this point against OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, and so on. Despite those lawsuits, those same companies are now striking licensing deals with all sorts of media and tech companies. And sometimes this is being done without necessarily the writers or the people who are part of those licensing deals may or may not realize what's going on here. I just saw an announcement the other day that WordPress, the corporate parent of WordPress, is going to strike a licensing deal with one of the AI companies. And that would also include everything that's published at Tumblr and things that are published at WordPress.com. Do you as a writer or an author get an opt-out? I don't know, maybe. I don't know where to tell you to go to opt yourself out. And in any event, if it's on the web, if your material has been sitting on a website for any amount of time, it's already been scraped and put into these models anyway. And one thing I forgot to mention is that the ChatGPT model is known to be trained on a huge corpus of pirated books. You may have seen the Atlantic article, which will be linked to in the resource guide, where you could actually search for your author name and for your books to see if it was in fact part of the corpus that was used for trading that was, a bunch of pirated work. A lot of authors found their work in there and then realized the magnitude of the issue that we're now dealing with. So in any event, if they're fighting these lawsuits, saying that it's fair use, why would they then go and make licensing deals and pay for the content? Well, they're probably hedging their bets. They don't want to end up with a lot of stuff that a lot more liability than they need to have. So it's very interesting. You've got the left hand doing something different from the right hand here. And many people, the conjecture is that the New York Times decided to sue because OpenAI decided they were only going to give the New York Times so much money, and the New York Times was insulted by the amount of money offered for the licensing deal. So that's when the New York Times decided to sue, trying to extract more money out of the deal. Jean asks if there's any way to hide your content on a website, and we will get to that. Okay, so now let's go to the last question, protecting the outputs. So currently, this is global, not just the US. Copyright law does not protect the output of AI, generally speaking, because copyright is for human creation. It's not for non-living creation, or I should say it's not for non-human creation. There was if anyone remembers the monkey photograph case where the monkey took a photo, monkey doesn't get copyright in the photo because copyright is for humans. So we had a very kind of similar case in history applying to photography. So when cameras were invented in the early 1800s, at first, photographs were not protected under copyright because they were being produced by a machine. That was the perspective. So the law said, therefore, it's not a human creation and the photograph isn't protected. But we changed our minds about that within several decades. And then photographs gained copyright protection just like anything else. My sense is that we're going to end up in a similar place when you see AI human collaborations. So, for example, there was a graphic novel submitted to the US Copyright Office called Zarya of the Dawn. And it was granted copyright protection because when this author filed, her name's Kashtanova, she didn't say that the images or illustrations were generated by copyright. She wrote the story, but then she used an AI image generator to get the images that she wanted, and then I assume probably further refined them or had to do a lot of prompting to get just what she wanted. Once the Copyright Office learned that the images were AI generated, it rescinded the copyright certification. It kept in place the registration for the text and the story and the arrangement of the images, but the images themselves are not protected, and any one of us could use those images and it would be totally fine because they're not protected under the law. I think the author is still fighting this case, but to me, it does feel like she probably ought to get protection for that because it would be very hard for any one of us to end up with this exact same result. How do we know what prompts she used? How do we know what tools she used? How much did she Photoshop the results? I don't know. It would probably be very hard to reproduce this. But if it were just a purely AI generated work, then no, it doesn't get protection, but we're still figuring out where is that line? How do you know when there's enough human involvement to offer copyright protection over the material? And of course, the same applies to text-driven work. If you were to use ChatGPT to generate material, the resulting material technically isn't protected under copyright law, but it would be if you then somehow refashioned it, edited it, revised it, and made it your own. Okay, so let's talk about unscrupulous AI use, of which I myself experienced last year. So there were about half a dozen books that were published on Amazon and also made their way over to Goodreads that had my name on them. But if you started reading them, they were kind of very generic, vague copycats of the sorts of things I write. It wasn't straightforward copyright infringement because it wasn't reprinting material from my books, but it was pretty obviously AI generated and, prompting ChatGPT or some other software to write on the topics that you see on the covers here. And then they just put my name on it. A lot of people have asked me, well, could you have avoided this if there weren't ebook editions of your work? Or could you have avoided this if you didn't sell on Amazon? And the answer is no. Like that plays absolutely no role in the fact that anybody can generate these using AI software, regardless of whether I have books for sale on Amazon. So people didn't need to have my books. They just had to generate the material from somewhere and then put my name on them and upload them to Amazon. And they can bank on people searching for my name and for things that I've written because of just my visibility in the marketplace. And in fact, the whole reason I found out about these books was because someone who takes my classes, like a class like this, she saw that I had a class coming up on a topic she liked, but she wasn't interested in taking the class. She wanted to read a book. And so she went to Amazon and looked for whether or not I had written any books on the class topic. And she came up with these. Fortunately, she was very smart and looked a little bit closer before making a purchase and realized they looked suspicious. And that's when she wrote me and said, I found these books while looking for your work, and I don't think they're yours. And so I finally did get them taken down. There are lots of different flavors of this on Amazon, of AI generated material. Sometimes you'll find books that have been generated using AI, and then they'll put a real author name on it, hoping to trick people into buying it, as that happened with me. People using AI will also generate unauthorized biographies of famous people. They generated stories about, they'll generate books about things in the news, like when Prince Charles was diagnosed with cancer. Immediately, an AI generated book went up on Amazon about King Charles's cancer. It's not Prince Charles, King Charles's cancer, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to be super careful whenever you're looking at books on current events, because there's a good chance that AI was used to get a book up very quickly. Barclay wonders if Amazon's being sued for publishing AI-generated books which aren't written by the printed author. So far, no. Certainly, I was approached by lawyers who wanted to see if I was interested in a class action suit. But for lots of reasons, I said no. But there certainly are class action suits underway. They're not against Amazon. They're against the AI companies. So we're still waiting for someone to sue Amazon for allowing this material to continue hitting the market. The New York Times ran an article not long ago about all of the AI generated travel books that are appearing. So you need to be careful if you're looking really at any nonfiction category where someone might easily generate AI content. That's very easy to do with travel because there's so much online web-oriented information about travel. And so Amazon has put a couple restrictions in place. One of the first was, okay, you can only publish 3 books per day, which hasn't really stopped the flood of material, unfortunately. And then the other thing they've done is they've asked authors behind the scenes to disclose whether or not they used AI to generate the book. They're not counting AI assisted books. They're only counting purely AI generated books as AI books, which I think is fair. But that material or that checkbox, that's not being disclosed to the consumer. So if you visit, Amazon and go shopping for books, it's not going to tell you if an author used AI or not. So that so far is not transparent at all. On the flip side, if you were to visit Audible and buy audiobooks, it will tell you very transparently if it's a synthetic voice, meaning it's an AI generated voice. So there is disclosure on the audiobook side, but not on the writing side. We're still waiting for that. Recently, you may have seen the Today Show host, Savannah Guthrie. She had a book come out within the last couple of weeks called Mostly What God Does. It's been a bestseller. It actually sold out. And that's when all of the fraud people descended and started generating fake versions of this book. They did workbooks and summaries, handbooks, as you can see here. And sometimes to elude detection, they actually misspelled the author's name. to make it a little bit, to let the scam maybe go on a little bit longer than it might otherwise. So that's another kind of wrinkle in all of this, is that rather than using the exact author name that they're ripping off of, they'll change the first name, or they'll have a misspelling, or there'll be some minor discrepancy to avoid detection. Jean wonders if Ingram is doing anything yet regarding AI generated books. And so far, this problem hasn't really gone into Ingram. I have seen a few isolated examples of the fraudsters using Amazon's expanded distribution. So if those who aren't familiar with it, if you self-publish your work through Amazon, you can then check the expanded distribution option, and Amazon will push it out to the rest of the market, and they use Ingram to do that. So there have been some isolated cases where these books have been distributed by Ingram out to barnesandnoble.com and bookshop.org. This happened with the Maui Fires book last summer. I've seen it happen in a few other isolated cases as well. And those generally come down pretty quickly, often by the retailers once there's a media story about it, right? So that's one of the downsides of this, is that usually they don't get taken down until there is media attention. One of the things that protects Ingram from getting a lot of this action is that you need to have an ISBN number for your book in order to distribute through Ingram, and that's a cost. It's a cost that you don't encounter when you're publishing through Amazon. So that's one of the reasons why we're not seeing it as widespread outside of Amazon. There are other ways that AI is used to infringe on rights. This would be probably a derivative or subsidiary right, or maybe a right of publicity, which is different, but also can be abused. Where we see, you can go to the site today, Social Draft, and find chatbots that have been trained on the author's work. And then you can buy a Neil Gaiman chatbot to have a conversation about his work for $5. And I'm pretty sure he's not getting a cut of that. The Authors Guild lawsuit mentions this activity, and part of its lawsuit is meant to stop this activity. All right, so now I get to the protection part. I want to be clear, there's only so much you can do. A lot of the material has already been ingested. So like I said, the pirate ship has already sailed. There's no getting it back into port. So I would just, don't run yourself ragged trying to undo what's already been done. But obviously you can be smart going forward. So for those of you who are actively publishing books, I would say set up a Google alert if you don't have one, for your author name and your book titles, as like just a baseline. Know what's happening around the titles and the name. Keep an eye on Amazon and Goodreads. Goodreads is actually a really good way to see if someone's publishing books under your name, because as I discovered, if a book appears on Amazon with your name on it, it will often get cross-posted to Goodreads very quickly. And so my official Goodreads profile had a bunch of books sitting on it that I hadn't written that were generated by AI, which helped me find the ones that weren't coming up in Amazon search. So if you have an official Goodreads profile, that can actually be helpful for you in spotting this more quickly. As I said, though, people are changing the names of the authors in slight ways. This happened with Ted Gioia. So Ted Gioia is a really well-known jazz critic and author, and people were publishing books under the Gioia name, but not with the first name Ted. It was a different first name, but he still found it. A reader alerted him to the activity, and the work got taken down. If you are in negotiations with a publisher, you can negotiate the publishing contract to opt out of training and to only have AI use with your permission. Publishers vary a lot in what they're willing to agree to here. They're unlikely to agree to a blanket clause that says you will not use AI ever, even within spitting distance of my book, because they are going to use AI for marketing purposes. Absolutely. And most of them already are. So they need the latitude to use AI for marketing, for internal productivity, but that doesn't mean your work is going to be used to train AI models. Okay, so I don't think you have to be scared of that part. The publishers themselves, as you can imagine, they're not any more interested in having books trained on AI without compensation. They're on the same page as you for the most part, right? So, but you can put in your contract, look, I don't want you to use AI in any way for my cover design process, or if you're thinking about it, you have to get my approval or you have to consult with me. You can do the same for things like editing. But again, you have to give the publisher some latitude for the sorts of processes that you want them to be able to be more productive and efficient, especially on the marketing side. The robots.txt at your website or blog, if you're not familiar with that file, it's there. Every website has a robots.txt file that basically has instructions to Google and other crawlers to the AI crawlers. And so you can tell AI crawlers, you are not allowed to use this website's material for training or for ingestion. And I have an example here on the slide of what that looks like. So you're basically saying, nope, 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 nope. and as far as I know, they respect that. So that's something that you can do. And if you don't know how to do it, it can be done very easily by a techie friend or teenager or whomever is well-versed in websites. That said, you can't prevent bad actors from doing what they're going to do. So as soon as you put something online in a public forum, you're really trusting the honest people to do as you wish. It's not going to stop dishonest people. Look for opt-outs as needed for any software that you use. So this includes Gmail, Google Docs, Microsoft Word, etc. There are all sorts of softwares that you're currently using that probably have an AI component already, and it's really up to you to look for the opt-outs if you're concerned about training or use. You want to avoid the free generative AI software. So the free version of ChatGPT does have some allowances for training on your prompts or whatever you paste into that text box. So if you want privacy and you want an assurance that whatever you put into that AI model is not going to be used for training, you're probably going to have to pay for the software. Maybe some of you will want to consider getting a trademark. So this requires registering with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. It's very costly, like thousands of dollars. I would say you really need a lawyer to do that. I would not try to do it by yourself. And this is one way you can help protect business surrounding your name if you have a long-standing business associated with your name. Now, this is not going to be a good idea for a lot of people. But if you are already very well known with, if you're like a Rick Steves sort of figure, this makes total sense. And finally, I would encourage you to become a member of the Authors Guild. So the Authors Guild obviously has a lawsuit already underway, although it just pertains to people writing fiction. It doesn't cover nonfiction. There's a separate lawsuit by other people for the nonfiction. And also the New York Times and the Authors Guild are considering maybe putting their lawsuits together. We'll see if that happens. But the Authors Guild has a legal department. And if you run into any of the issues I've described here with fraudulent work, fraudulent use of your book or name, they're there to help. And in the reading list that I'm going to share with you, I'm including a link to their FAQ that has their own guidance on how to protect yourself, which includes some of the things I've already talked about. And also, they often say, if you're encountering this, please reach out to our legal department. So if you're a member, you then get access to those services. And I will say, when I personally was having trouble getting those fraudulent books taken down from Amazon, and I did have trouble, they were the first to stand up and advocate for me and use their back channels with Amazon to try and resolve the problem. So they can help fight for you and use channels not available to the general public. All right, so let's move on to the more positive side of this. I don't want to instill fear and anxiety. That's not my point. I do want you to protect yourself and understand what's happening. I think this is This is a revolutionary technology. It's going to affect how publishing works. We've already seen how it's affecting publishing, and it is being used to good end and in legal ways. So I just saw this the other day. I don't know if how many of you are familiar with Hank Green. He's the brother of John Green. They're both really well-known authors, and they don't like to fearmonger around AI. They try to look for, uh, a reasonable position on it. And Hank Green says, AI is doing lots of tedious shit right now, and the creative stuff it's doing at the moment, it's not that good, which is a common view. Some folks do not feel threatened by AI whatsoever because its outputs can be so generic and lackluster and not terribly impressive. On the flip side, it is going to get better. So, you have to recognize that some of the models we have available for use today, like ChatGPT, are playing to the lowest common denominator, and there are more sophisticated uses of it that you can build on your own if you have the money and the knowledge. I use Otter and have for a long time to help with meeting notes and transcripts of classes. It helps me with my reporting. It saves me hours upon hours upon hours every week. So if you have any sort of audio transcription that you need done, whether it's from meetings or classes, this is an AI powered technology, and I would hate to lose it. Similarly, on YouTube, when I upload videos from classes, YouTube is now using AI to create chapter marks so that people can more easily navigate through the class and just go to the portion that they want to hear or listen to. These are the free classes that I put on YouTube. So I just don't have, it's not worth the time for me. I'm not earning money necessarily on this. So I'm not spending time creating chapter marks, but I'm so grateful that YouTube is now using AI to do it. Saves me time, and it's a great service to the people who are watching. And if you're using Grammarly or Notion or some other tools that have AI integration, you may have seen things that allow you to make your post shorter, or make it longer, or make it more persuasive, or to add hashtags, or to take out the snarky tone. Like, for example, if you've written an email to someone that is really angry, and it probably has some stuff in it that is going to make the other person upset, but you just can't get the anger out, give that job to ChatGPT and ask it to make it less angry. This is a really good use of the tool. Barclay asks, how do you know that Otter isn't scraping your content? Well, honestly, I haven't looked at its terms since I'm a paying customer. I would imagine there's an opt-out if I'm not already opted out, but even if it is, I don't care. Like, even if it's scraping my content, how is it going to profit off of it in a way that I'm not? I don't know how that would happen. And if they want to use it to train a model, go for it. Like, to me, some of the things that I'm using here, like the YouTube videos or the meeting transcriptions and things, to me, these are grains of sand, and I'm not worried. It doesn't pose a threat to me. I realize different people can come to different conclusions on this, but I am not precious about the materials that I put in these programs by and large. And it's a ton of material that I'm putting through. And if they can find something valuable in there, more power to them. I find the thing that is more disconcerting as a business person, more disconcerting to me, is that I do have a website at janefriedman.com that has thousands of articles that I get search traffic from. And Google is now implementing AI into the search engine that tries to answer questions without sending people to websites. So, for example, I get a lot of traffic from people asking Google how to get published, or how to find an agent, or how to write a book proposal, etc. And now you can just get the answer on Google's like as you see here, right on the Google page, and you might not even see the link to my website. And so that means I'm losing some potential customers who would take a class or buy a book or sign up for my newsletter. So, is this good or bad? I mean, it seems pretty bad for my business. But I don't know. It's very early and it's hard to say. Would I want my material not to be scraped then? I don't know. And full disclosure, I'm allowing the AI bots to scrape the content on my site because I consider it a public service anyway, and I want them to deliver the correct answers to questions. And here, their answers to the questions are actually not entirely correct. So notice the definition of self-publishing. Publish your book without the involvement of a third-party publisher. I don't even know what that means, a third-party publisher. Online self-publishing platforms have made it possible for anyone to traditionally publish their work. Well, that's a contradiction, isn't it? If you're self-publishing, you are not traditionally publishing. So you can see that. I think everyone here knows that you can't trust the stuff that you get out of ChatGPT or some of the generative AI today. And this just proves that point. It is not, there's a lot of errors and it's not perfect, although I do assume it's going to get better over time. Some reassurance on the creative end. The level of interest in reading a book written entirely by AI among adults in the US as of last year, I would like them to do this again. I'm curious how much has changed. It's pretty low, the number of people who are really interested in this. Most people want to read and consume media by human beings. And I do believe that is always going to be the case. There was another study showing where on, I can't remember if it was Fiverr or it was a marketplace like Fiverr or Upwork, where you can, get bids on projects of all kinds, like writing, design, programming, etc. And the job area that has seen the biggest decline is writing, which may sound scary on the face of it, but this is like really low level writing that's not particularly creative and is for a business oriented and marketing oriented purpose in some cases. Fiverr is also where some of self-published authors have gone to hire ghostwriters who they pay pennies to write their next book for them. And now they've switched over to generative AI because it's cheaper. So, some of this is just like, it's the people who are interested in using AI to generate entire books are probably the same people who liked using Fiverr to find ghostwriters to write their books. Something funny came up just the other week, reading an ebook, and I noticed this little weird artifact, created with Sketch. And for those who don't know, Sketch is a website building tool. And the fact that this is sitting in the book, it's a mistake. Like, it should have been taken out. It tells me that this person might have been using an AI software to generate material for the book. So be on the lookout in your ebooks for created with Sketch, because to me that might be a giveaway if people are forgetting to delete that phrase from their book. So some of the tools of high interest to writers are ChatGPT, which is general purpose. It's not made for, I would say it's more for like, it's not for creative writing. You could try, but I would say it's more for straightforward business use or straightforward inquiries. Jasper is the market leader in AI writing for copy, so business writing, marketing sorts of writing. And then Pseudo-Write is the market leader for creative writing. And in my reading list for you, I have an interview with the founder of Pseudo-Write, who is a novelist himself. And he's a co-founder. He has other people who built this business with him, but he also has, both optimism and pessimism around where this might go. So I wanted to just show you a couple things before we go to Q&A with ChatGPT quickly. And for those of you who might not have used it yet, or might have just been fearful, or you just didn't want to give them any material to work with, I just want to show you some of the things that are possible, even with very bare bones prompting. And you'll see here on the slide, I have some of the ChatGPT prompting frameworks. You'll have a link to this in the reading guide if you want to look at that more closely. So I'm going to stop the share and move over to my browser. Give me just a moment. Okay. So right now I'm just using the free version of ChatGPT, logged into my own account. And let's say I'm going to offer a class on how to write hybrid memoir. And I'm feeling tired and I don't want to write the first draft. And I just want to see if ChatGPT can give me anything useful to build on. So I'll say, I'm a writing instructor and online class provider that will be offering a 1-hour class on how to write and publish hybrid memoir. I need a 500-word description of this class that is authoritative and accessible, with a bulleted list of key takeaways. So let's see what it does. It's even given me a title: Writing and Publishing Hybrid Memoir, a Transformative Journey. We've got now the key takeaways with some nice bulleted lead-ins. That's very nice. Keeps going. I did ask for 500 words. That's quite a bit. Okay. And there we are. Okay, so looking at it, it's not really what I'm looking for, because it's merging elements of autobiography, fiction, poetry, and essay. That's actually not what I mean by hybrid memoir. I mean, like researched memoir. That's really what I mean. And hybrid memoirs break away to weave together diverse genres. No, it actually is getting it wrong. So I need to give it something a little bit better to use. And so, for example, I do have a hybrid memoir article at my site right here. So what I could do is just copy and paste this so that ChatGPT understands a little bit better what a hybrid memoir is. And say, write that description, but base it on the idea of hybrid memoir as expressed in this article. Let's see what it does. So here we go. So now we have the compelling fusion of rigorous inquiry and deep personal narrative. And of course, it's relying heavily on this particular author's book as the basis, as I asked, Wired for Music. And it's pulling key takeaways that are some of the themes that she wrote about in her blog post. And so maybe I could then use this as the basis of a marketing description for the class. It would be a terrific description if that writer were actually teaching this class. So you can see it really matters what you give ChatGPT. And for those who are curious about, can I feed it really large amounts of data? It is limited. And also you would want to do that only on the paid version. But Google's Gemini allows you to feed it, I think, up to about 70,000 words that and it will remember. If you want to try and play around with things that can remember a lot of your work at once, and so that it will draw on your own work when it's trying to come up with new material for you. Okay, I want to show you something else that I think is super useful if you are confronted with a contract. So let's say you're reviewing a contract, you're going to be on a podcast, and you you see the following scary clause, and you don't really know what it means. And you feel like there are probably some red flags in here. So you ask, I received this contract for a podcast, and I'm not sure whether to sign it. Can you tell me what the red flags might be? So let's see what it says. Okay, it's giving me some, blah, blah, blah. And now it's getting into the real specifics. The contract grants the producer a very broad and seemingly unlimited right to use your work, perpetual and universal rights, exclusive internet rights, ownership of programs, lack of specificity on compensation, use for promotion, motion picture and TV rights. Now, you can't use ChatGPT as your lawyer, but it can give you an idea when you're heading into maybe into an agreement that you should have a lawyer look at, or it might help you formulate better questions to ask whoever sent you that contract and ask about what concerns you about it. I know that contracts is an area where people can be very intimidated. So I really like the use of ChatGPT for this purpose to analyze contract language. Okay, since we've hit 3 o'clock, I'm going to stop the share. And, oh, I forgot to mention, hold on, let me go back to my slides. I have just a few more comments to make. I just finished reading in the New Yorker a profile of Lucian Grange. He's the CEO of Universal Music Group. And some of you may be aware, AI is already playing a significant role in how the music industry is thinking about its future. And they're already looking at licensing agreements for AI. And I thought this was just such a remarkable profile of someone who's not afraid. And he's willing to look at what's the upside here and how can we make a business out of it. And toward the end of the piece, he says, technology has served the industry, the music industry, very well, from sheet music to upright pianos to big bands to the huge CBS radio network in the US that was going to destroy fledgling shellac sales. In any case, he added, there was no point in fighting generative AI. What are we going to do? When Google or Microsoft or any of these other huge companies makes an investment in developing AI products and tools. And of course, this is someone who saw the whole Napster revolution, was able to come back out of that and find the new way forward, which was through licensing. And so he's very optimistic, might be too strong a word, but he sees the way to wriggle through for the music industry's future. And he's someone who, if you read this profile, he clearly values the artists and the art. There's no question about this. This isn't someone who's just interested in making money. He values the art. And so I think reading this profile of Lucian Grange is a really good antidote to any feelings of fear or helplessness. I do find that both publishers and the Authors Guild and other groups are looking at how can we get this done fairly and how can we get this done transparently. And I do have optimism that's going to happen. It will just take a little bit of time. So I've been mentioning, these resources or the reading list that I have for you. And if you go to the following link, it's another bit.ly link. You can see AI resources for writers. I'm going to keep this updated as I discover new things. So keep this link handy. This list will change in the weeks and months ahead. All right, if you missed the slide link at the very beginning of class, it's here again, a bit.ly link. So make sure that you get that. If you didn't catch the previous link, as long as you get this one, you're going to have access to all of the resources that I've mentioned. All right, I'm going to stop the share and then we can do a little Q&A.
I have to say, I grabbed a bunch of valuable, useful suggestions that I'm like, no AI. But now I'm like, oh, I should check this out. This is very helpful. So Michelle, you want to go through, we've been checking the chat for the questions during the program, and Jane, you already answered a bunch of them, but you want to just ask a couple of them?
Sure. So, first of all, Sheila has added a certain amount of code, sorry, but that Jane will probably have more information on protecting your content. So, there's code that she added, it's in the chat itself. But Jane, is there anything in addition that you want to add to protecting your content beyond what you've already said?
Think so. I think I covered it all on that one key slide, the protecting your rights slide. That's really everything I can think of as of today that you should do.
Now,
now there certainly might be new things in the future, but today that's the list.
That's the list. Great. So Barclay was curious as to why you didn't join in the class action against Amazon.
Oh, well, the class action isn't against Amazon. If it were, I might have.
Okay.
So the class actions are against OpenAI, Microsoft, and other companies like that who are developing the models and have been implicated in the training of copyrighted material. And one of the reasons I don't want to get involved in this is because I do not want to become the face of these lawsuits. And I'm actively reporting on these issues for my newsletter, and I'm sensitive to being seen as having a bias in one direction or the other. I mean, I've got my own personal feelings about it all, but I try to keep those out of sessions like this because I think reasonable people can disagree on the law. I've seen reasonable people, lawyers disagree on the law. Organizations can differ in where they come out. And I serve so many different constituencies that I don't want to be pegged as being in favor of one path over the other.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. Barclay wanted to know, do you think Grammarly is scraping editorial content from authors as they plug their content in?
I don't know. You would have to read their terms of service. I know that you're not the first person to wonder or ask or be concerned. So they have definitely had to address this somewhere. So I would look up their FAQ. They've got to have something about AI somewhere in their FAQ, and I would see what their policy is so that you can make the best decision for yourself.
Okay, great. Jean wanted to know if ChatGPT 3.5 is the free version and is 4.0 plus better.
It's definitely better when you pay, no question. So you're going to get better answers. You can also do more things. So far, I just showed you the free version, but if it's technology that you think you would have a daily use for, especially business use, I do think it's probably worth shelling out the money. Is it $20 a month? I can't remember. Last time I checked, I think it was $20 a month.
Okay. Keith just added, any special concerns when using ChatGPT or other AI as a research assistant? And is this starting to show up in contracts?
So there are concerns when you're using any of these models because they can bring back incorrect information. And it's really hard to get them to say that it's incorrect. Like you can try challenging it and say, how do you know this? What's the source for this? And see if it can defend its answer. And sometimes it will say, oh, I made that up. I've seen authors try to use it to come up with comp titles. So like if you're trying to find comp titles for your query or proposal, sometimes it can help you with that sort of research. But if you go to my guide, my reading guide that I mentioned, I actually have a different resource mentioned for scholarly research. So there are different models or tools you would want to use when the sourcing is important to you and you want to see attribution. There are models that will give you that. So please use those if your main goal is research.
Okay.
And also, one of the questions was, where is the Lucian Grange profile? And it's on the reading list. So just for everyone.
Yes.
Just so you know that.
And it was in the New Yorker magazine for those who are subscribers.
Okay. Let's see. Jane Sutherland asks, you may not know this, Is Writing Aid Pro using AI?
I would have to imagine they are. I
Okay.
mean, I will say my assumption today is that every software like that is using it. And I think I'll also add, I think sometimes I'm not sure there's a lot of recognition of how much AI is in our lives, generally
Already.
speaking. Like your driver's license, the photo on your driver's license is stored in countless databases that are sold to police departments and immigration and the TSA, et cetera, et cetera. And like that's another ship that sailed. You can't take back the fact that your driver's license photo is in those databases and being used by law enforcement.
Yeah.
And that's AI powered. So your bank, it's using AI to determine fraudulent transactions. So I would assume it's there unless you know for sure that it isn't, because they say up front it isn't.
Got it. Okay. Shauna says, seems to me the Chicago Manual of Style, etc., have a good case for copyright violation. ChatGPT can edit per different style guides.
Well, copyright infringement would have to be reproduction of the Chicago Manual of Style text. So no one can really, they can't accuse a model of infringement for executing on the style. Now they might be able to accuse it of infringement for like training on that handbook, but not for the application of the handbook.
Okay. Jody asked, do you see AI getting good enough to put genre fiction writers out of business? And I will say, as a genre fiction writer myself, I don't believe so, but I'm very curious as to what you think.
I don't foresee it as of today. And there's a really great article in my reading list about the intersection of creativity and AI. And I think in there is some of the most eloquent expressions of why authors are not likely endangered by this. And part of it is the community that forms around the experience of reading a book. So, what people have thought is that one day maybe you'll be able to go to an AI model and say, I want a thriller that has this type of protagonist in this sort of setting with these sorts of twists and that kind of style, et cetera, et cetera. And you can just program the book that you would like to read. But then who are you going to discuss it with? And how, it takes a lot of the also surprise and enjoyment out of discovering something that you didn't tell it to do.
Right.
So I do think there's going to be a significant amount of authors using AI assistants. And like you might be able to create your own little ChatGPT model that's been fed all of your novels, and you can use it as like, it's like collaborating with yourself, on your best day. Think of it that way. And let's hope that there are laws in place that ensure that only you can do that no one else can do that. But certainly I could see a future where Stephen King's publisher feeds all of his works into a model and continues producing more King novels after he's dead, assuming he's granted them the rights to do so. I think that's my fear, is that we'll get a lot of popular stuff or popular authors that continue being popular because they can continue producing work after they're gone, which already happens. Like we already have authors who are dead, and the publishers are having ghostwriters do that work.
Yes, absolutely.
Exactly.
But absolutely. I don't think that, again, as of today, I don't think it presents a danger to the human author.
Okay. All right. Sheila wants to know your thoughts on using generative AI for some research that a human may be struggling with. For example, she's used Perplexity AI, which reveals all of its sources, for some research about regimental movements during World War I.
Yeah, so that goes back to the point I was making earlier. Perplexity is, in fact, the one that I recommend if you're looking for sources. Like, I don't see any reason not to make your life easier. Use these tools, and let them help you with finding leads. Just you have to be double and triple checking to make sure you're not being misled.
Okay.
Interesting.
Okay.
Anyone else? We're keeping an eye on the chat, but if you want to raise your hand or I'm just trying to see how many other people are on the call that I can't see. I think that the most interesting question, which is a question we cannot answer, is AI is always learning.
Yes.
And the boundary, we have created a Frankenstein's monster, Barclay. The problem is we don't know at what point AI will become better at this thing we're asking it to do than we ourselves can be. But that's something nobody can predict. And some of the creators of AI, I've read, that's sort of their objective, which terrifies me.
Yeah, there's this desire to see it maybe cross over into general intelligence. I don't know if that's what you mean, but there are people who are both worried about that and excited for that.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, I don't think anyone knows.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at this point, the idea of being alert to the problems and also the opportunities, which I feel like you did a wonderful service. Like, I'm going to talk to Michelle afterward and say, maybe we can make our
Absolutely.
lives easier here.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, this was extremely valuable, and I hope everybody here has learned a little bit more, maybe gotten more nervous, or maybe hopefully less nervous about AI. And I love the idea of, making sure that if you really use it, you use the paid version, that there are protections embedded in that paid version.
Yeah.
Any final questions or something to add? Thank you all. Jane, thank you as always.
Yes,
Terrific
absolutely.
program. And I'll be putting together this recording for everyone in the next few days, so keep an eye out for a link. And please come back to other programs that the Writers Circle's running. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.